All right, everyone. Well, welcome to our December installment of our reading series, the final one of 2021, which is something I'm not interested in really thinking about too much because it doesn't feel real. But thanks for being with us, especially since this season can be kind of crazy. So we're excited that you all have that you have decided to be with us. So to kick us off, before we get started tonight with the reading, I would like to take a moment to thank two of our outgoing directors and introduce you to two new members of our directorial team. And so first off, a huge thank you to both Stacy Eastep and Arlen Dunn for their 2 years of service with our organization. Both directors saw us through our online through our move online during the pandemic and helped us promote and fundraise for countless important nonprofits here in Knoxville. If you all will give them a round of applause with me, they have been amazing. So we're very thankful for them. And also in that light, as we move into our new directorial era, I am thrilled to introduce you to the two new members who have joined with us for this time around. So as a big welcome to our newest reading series coordinator, Denise R Irvin. Irvin is a creative writer hewn from the streets, classrooms, and boardrooms of the city of Detroit. Formerly educated in both literature and business, she has served in corporate America by day and as an adjunct college professor by night. Her work focuses on the experiences of those who look, live, and love like her. She has spent nearly 2 decades participating in open mics around the country, publishing her poems in online and print journals, and crafting full-length novel projects. Most recently, Denise has performed for Michigan State University, Lyra Corporation, and the DSO, in addition to winning a United States of Writing grant from Poets and Writers. Her poetry chapbook, A Glimpse of My Soul, and novella, Prelude to Praise, A Word of Testimony, are both available online. So please welcome Denise. We're super excited to have her. We are also very excited to welcome Sydney P back to the Sundress team as our newest community outreach director. Sydney P is a queer disabled creator living in Knoxville, Tennessee, where they recently completed their bachelor's degree in sociology and English literature. They are interested in the relationship between art, history, and power, as well as innovative methods of communicating information. So please also welcome Sydney. We are super excited to have them as well. So, all right, thanks so much. I'll hand it over to Stacy.
Thank you, Tori. Welcome everybody to the December reading series. It's my last time hosting, so I thank you all very much for being here. For anybody who doesn't know, this event is hosted by the Sundress Academy for the Arts, a writer's residency and arts collective that hosts workshops, retreats, and residencies for writers in all genres, including poetry, fiction, nonfiction, journalism, academic writing, playwriting, and more. And you can find out more at sundressacademyforthearts.com. This event is hosted courtesy of Sundress Publications, and the land on which Sundress Publications operates is part of the traditional territory of the Salagi peoples, now Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, and United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians, and the Soyaha peoples, Yuchi, Muskogee Creek. We'd like to thank the Tennessee Arts Commission for the grant, which makes it possible for us to pay our readers tonight. And before we get started with the readings, I'd like to introduce our Community Outreach Director, Arlen Dunn, to tell us about this month's community partner. Arlen?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this awesome reading tonight. It's truly been an honor to be part of this space for the last couple of years, especially in the midst of so much going on in our world. Poetry and the arts has been such a grounding space for many. So thank you to the poets and readers, as well as everyone that tunes in each month. So our community partner for December is The Bottom, a nonprofit multi-space community center and home to a Black affirming bookshop, which recently celebrated their grand opening at their new home in East Knoxville. The Bottom serves as a central hub to build community, celebrate culture, and engage in creativity through multiple program opportunities and fellowships, as well as a space that affirms Black youth and adults here in the community. The Bottom was founded by Dr. Nkechi Elamine, a sociologist and professor at UT, and was named after the Black neighborhood in East Knoxville that was demolished in the 1950s by urban renewal and institutionalized racism. The Bottom was rehoused at its newest location off Magnolia Avenue and is a collective space to reclaim and reimagine Black space and community, and has grown to include a tea room, a podcast studio, an expanded sewing studio with a youth leadership program, as well as Black Affirming Bookstore, which has an online presence as well. I know many of us were touched by the passing of the great Bell Hooks, and it was so wonderful to be able to go to the Bottom where they had multiple copies of books from Bell Hooks, and they have a lot of programs coming up, including different readings by authors and several different events in the community. I encourage you to check them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlen. All right, so let me go ahead and introduce our first reader. Hee Lee was born in South Korea and raised in Peru. She is the author of 3 poetry chapbooks: Dear Bear from Platypus Press 2021, Bedtime, Riverbed from Compound Press 2017, and most recently, Connotary, which was selected as the winner for the 2021 Frost Place Chapbook Competition. Her poetry has been published or is forthcoming at Poetry Northwest, the Georgia Review, Poetry, New England Review, and Southern Review, among others. Please welcome Hee Lee.
Hello, such an honor to be here among so many of you, and to celebrate some pre-New Year weekend. I'll be reading some poems mainly from my chapbook, most recent chapbook, Connotary, though also some from a book, a full length I'm currently working on, sprinkle here and there. But first of all, Connotary is a word I made up to mean a dictionary of connotations, and it's pretty much consists of a list of words that I've translated into connotations rather than literal meanings. The first poem is called Madrugada, which I have translated as small hours. So Madrugada as small hours. 6:03 a.m. An unripe sunlight percolates through air, canopy of oak, window and yellow curtain, into my living room. It must have been a day like this, the birth of a word, the word an offering, hatching within a fertile mind. That instance a small god many have beheld at least once, a large jellyfish with the body of an unraveling clementine passing through. The house billows, luminous cells skip across the walls, and even the gray couch gleams. Flecks of morning made crescent with the shadow of leaf. So the second poem is called Disambiguation, and it has a parenthesis on the dis. And it's a poem about names. The names were given and I called Disambiguation. All moons in all waters are that one moon by Cho Hyun. That's the quote. Before immigrant, noun improper, body of water, lusting after stars, prone to flood before China, and me turning to look as if I was referent, or even ají, Peruvian pepper, affectionate nickname, ajicita, an onni older sister, before questioning a name, its relation to skin, story, what's outside, but everything else, before other, untouchable, planet humming to be heard. My parents spread open a Hanja dictionary on the hospital bed, their fingertips lifted, a name from the paper. 사랑해, heart-cradled, carried slowly as cloud. 빛날 he, flower with a shining throat for lantern. The next poem is called Inheritance as Invocation. Because there's pleasure in secrecy, I kneel in silence before a kitchen cabinet. I pull out the large can of sesame oil inhabiting this corner of the house. I remove the cap, bring my nose closer to the opening. The rim glistens copper, the smell of an unfamiliar soil, a country I was born to but didn't grow up with. I breathe it in. I breathe out 고소하다. This is still a word I cannot translate until it evaporates. At times, my mother tells me about my father, sets afloat hushed fairy tales into the waters of my nights. She explains my father is a lidded well, a close circle of arms, thumbs leaning on each other. How, as the eighth son, no one expected him to survive the winter. How he lives holding a birthday that migrates with the moon. Can you love what you don't know? I glance at the edge of a mirror, a crystal caught in my cornea. Maybe the unknown is but a hard mirage of what's known, a questionable carbon copy of the seer's mind. My curiosity draws me to this displaced image, selects from it. My parents' nostalgia expands it infinitely like a prison. I want to love what I don't know. I want to learn, allow myself this yearning. A homeland of mountains with low, uneven shoulders. In the distance, their outlines are plumed as if made from torn paper. A homeland of electric forests, persimmons, and expired peppermint candies in the shape of diamonds. This land was not promised to me, but my memories open their palms. They claim nothing as their own. They invoke. You have your father's face, an aunt told me once. A camel's long eyelashes and dark stars for eyes. I admit my father has passed on to me many of his idiosyncrasies, the closing of hands behind the back, the bottling of desire until it bursts into 1,000 iridescent needles of glass. But when I visit his old house in Chungju, I don't call it home. I glimpse a pair of cosmos flowers resting their heads against half-finished steps, caress their purple ears and ask if they'll remember me from time to time. I return to myself, broken and full. This next poem is part of a series of self-portrait poems, but it's self-portraits as other people, since much of who I am intersects with others. So this one is called Self-Portrait as You. I think, therefore I am, or I am laying here because you think of me. Your back blooms, my spine, a caterpillar has found a resting place on it. You, a warm line adding to my line. We converge into a single letter, write out the hanja in over the swirling galaxy of our dark blankets to mean us a soul. In Spanish, yo is the first person singular, a pair made from consonant and vowel. With my air and your ear, we utter it into existence. And I stands alone until we get intimate, peel the dress from its diphthong thighs. I love morning, and you rise for me, ready the scent of eggs and coffee, our yo omitted personhood and time infused into action. Outside, the city stirs to make a city. Trujillo as homecoming. And Trujillo is my hometown back in Peru. And the character that appears here, Alejandra, is a stand-in name for a childhood friend of mine, just for context. Trujillo as homecoming. Alejandra welcomes me back to our first home. Her arms white ferns, her fingers wispy fronds curling towards me, towards a small sun blushing on my cheek. She puckers her lips to greet the wind, which sings secretly close to my ear. Alejandra welcomes me back, and my heart stutters. I don't remember whether to turn my face left or right. I whisper, it's okay, es normal, for there to be sorrow in forgetting how to cross through gaps now filled with the gossamers of time. 괜찮아, está bien, for people to become strangers to their own bodies, question why absences insist on being woven into something new. Alejandra welcomes me back, so I go receive her vessel. I too unfurl green under the embrace of lush, unfamiliar arms. This next poem is called Upon Practicing a Second Language. I understood speech as a manner of wind. Voice could be voiceless, place nestled inside palate, the dark side of teeth or throats deep. When I couldn't parse ooh from root and foot, ears and letters showed themselves dragonflies, lured young by the smell of sap, hardened within splintering amber. In the end, I chose to laugh when I repeated dessert, dessert, driven mad with intention, until I found out what word I truly craved. Like this, I dropped my words into wishing wells, not believing it a waste. Some days, I noticed that to delight in the whimsy of meaning could also be a sign I was lonely, wanting to be, wanting to long, but I was happy too. I could savor the second a violet turned violent in my radiant mouth. Korea as things to review before landing. My origin story. My mother found me as a chestnut dangling from a tree. When I fell onto her lap, she was eating a copper pear with one hand, paging through a book with the other. She carried out the burr in the hollow of her arms. The spiny pupil made her bleed, but she didn't let go until I dropped from the shell. Later, I sprouted needles anew, afraid I was being nibbled away by the world. My grandfather's name. I thought my grandfather's name was 할아버지, only to find out it was the Korean word for grandfather. He was the one who taught me and my sister to sail a paper kite over a frozen river, to allow my index to flirt with its mercurial tail. An idiom. When I was given a norige to hang under my first hanbok jacket, I foresaw a pendulous love in my life. I alternated between laughing and sobbing, and short horns appeared on my back. From then on, a childlike misfortune took the shape of a blank page and muffled my steps in every new country I called home. I didn't want her at first, but eventually grew fond of her, held her hand when she cried at night. A road, the one I took to school when I lived in Changnyeong for that 1 year. I studied the occasional bush of forsythias on the side, prodding yellow against an absolute autumn sky. Self-portrait as my mother. After over 20 years in Peru, after burying her father in Daegu, my mother visits me in Wisconsin. We link arms, hairs unbearably light, walk down the oak leaf trail, glancing up at the trees blanketed with silence and the occasional underbelly of bridges. She wants pictures. So with a shutter's click, I freeze the narrow creeks by my mother's eyes. I notice her flourishing pores, prove her face has been a kind host to the dry Trujillian sky. As a little girl, I caught her tears when she had no one to talk to in Korean about fruit vendors trying to scam her, mistaking her for a tourist forever. Taxi drivers asking her whether she was from China or Japan, or another new acquaintance scolding, "This is how we do things here. Why wouldn't you make things easier for yourself?" Then I'd watch her move past what others barely left ajar, insist on living as a breathless field of seeds with its mouth always open. She taught me how to be a foreigner, garner my sunspots, some left by harsher stars, some gentler, knit a plentiful basket out of myself. Another day we'll rummage through it and relive ourselves in each other. I show my mother the photo I've taken. A lone piece of winter light had landed on her left cheek, as if it too could sense in her a glint of its future. And this is the last poem I'll be reading. It's called asterism, and asterism is a word that refers to a pattern of stars that is not formally acknowledged, like you would a constellation, but it is kind of the same idea as like a group of stars that is connected by the person itself. Asterism. Today too the sky arches in faithful trajectory, and even when there's no eye to keep it company, it unfurls stars for the season. Tonight my wonder is a needle without a thread. It embroiders with the missing links between the satellite silver, the dying edges of a sword, and oxtail bone I once nibbled clean. My grandmother's braids turned tinsel after 2 words, aluminium, allure, alumbrar, aludir, yesterday's cloud, my shed and rain over some stranger. I will meet another day, and the sheen over red pomegranate seeds on my sister's hands, warbles white like the sea between us. I have many questions I leave unresolved for tomorrow, and every luminous body, periphery and center, part liar, part storied lover, not a single thing untethered. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those beautiful poems. All right, our second reader is Christopher Citro, the author of If We Had a Lemon, We'd Throw It and Call That the Sun from Elixir Press 2021, winner of the 2019 Antivenom Poetry Award and the maintenance of the Shimmy-Shammy from Steel Toe Books in 2015. His honors include a 2018 Pushcart Prize for Poetry, a 2019 fellowship from the Ragdale Foundation, Columbia Journal's Poetry Award, and a Creative Nonfiction Award from the Florida Review. His poetry appears in Alaska Quarterly Review, American Poetry Review, Best New Poets, Iowa Review, Ploughshares, Gulf Coast, West Branch, and elsewhere. He lives in Syracuse, New York. Please welcome Christopher Citro.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you, Stacy and Aaron and everybody with the Sundress reading series for having me. I'm completely delighted to be with you all tonight. Thank you, Ae, for reading those amazing poems. That was really beautiful. I was really looking forward to that. And I'm extremely excited to hear Chaya read. So yes, lovely to see everybody. And thanks everybody out there in the Zoomosphere for being here. Yes, my name's Christopher, and I'd like to read you some of my poems. I'm going to be reading from my book, which came out on April 1st. If we had a lemon, we'd throw it and call that The Sun. And yeah, so this first poem starts with an epigraph by the poet Heather Crystal from her poem Taxonomy of That November. And the epigraph reads, "We were happy and wretched and cloudy and setting fire to everything for warmth." And this poem is called It's Something People in Love Do. It's a late film, not one of their best, clogged with a love interest that never really makes your pants itch. But when the Marx Brothers keep the train moving so the hero can make it to town to record the deed and afford to marry the girl of his dreams, they chop the whole damn train up to feed the fire. Frightened passengers in bustles and waistcoats watch their seats axed from beneath them as women cradle their children and men stand around looking affronted. Then they hack up the walls and the roofs, carrying armfuls of train forward to turn into steam, to keep things moving. And I'm not saying we should watch fewer old movies. What I am saying is maybe everything's not a metaphor for trying to pay the bills on time. I love your credit score. It could pin my credit score to the late summer soil and pee on its head. My credit score would roll over and take it. But what do you think of that chicken dinner I made last night? How caramelized the thighs, the bourbon from a plastic jug. How beautiful that farmhouse looks passing by in the distance. If we could get off this train, we could go get it and tear it to pieces with our teeth, tossing hallways and lintels to the flames. Then we could clean each other's face with our tongues. It's called kissing. People in love do it. And this next poem is called The People Who Live Near Us Are Our Neighbors. It used to have the word unfortunately at the end, but I thought that was probably too much. The people who live near us are our neighbors. 2 doors down, the neighbor kid hung a white wire reindeer with twinkle lights from a tree, as if shot and ready for butchery. It's pleasing to live so near the country, the trees, the rolling hills, and apple stands, but it does mean you have to put up with gunshots into the scrubland on winter evenings. Some nights there's a patrol car parked out front. We wish him and his family the best. We eat popcorn because it's all natural and sort of old-fashioned and brings us a little closer to the life of the soil. The life of the soil is nearby, past the gas station on 57, up the road from the dog park, across the intersection from where the guy lost control and slammed into a mother of 3. He was driving to McDonald's. It said that on the news report. He'd smoked the heroin just before heading out for his Tuesday dinner. His little silver cloud rising above us all, the dead reindeer made of lights, the popcorn, the gradual inconsistencies, and the fields someone still plows and tends and pulls pumpkins from when the morning dew gives gradual way to frost. I write a lot of poems about shopping. I don't know why. It's just a thing. I do all the grocery shopping. And so this isn't a grocery store poem. This is a dollar store poem. It's called Anyway and Try to Stay Alive on What It Gives Us. The off-brand dollar store sticky notes adhere to each other, great. To anything else in this world, less great. Like us, Sometimes it feels like the back of a big box store in here, my head, when you walk up to that wall of TVs all showing the same scenes. It's huge, but it's also lots of little not huge things. You know how we sound like idiots when we try to say important things? Well, me at least. Going shopping together is like living our lives together. Please don't tell me how they sprayed to kill mosquitoes, forgetting to warn the beekeepers, and the bodies are so high, the numbers themselves look obscene. All those zeros, all those empty holes in the honeycomb. I'm going to lose it next to the mustard with a label just like a leading national brand. Until you look closely, that is. There are words there, but not the ones we need. I used to have a dumb office job here in Syracuse, New York, where I'm Zooming from. I don't have that job anymore, but instead I have this poem. This is called You Can Keep Your Employee. Start again. This is called You Can Keep Your Employee of the Month Award. I need to work out a way to keep my rowboat with me, even at work. Double the amount of productivity you expect me to crank out? Sure, if I can do it standing in my rowboat, looking off into the distance for a heron nest deep inside the cottonwoods. Am I working quickly enough? Let me know when you get the chance. I'll be floating along the shore, watching midges form new constellations against a sky so blue it makes your eyes squeak. I'm going to have to clock in at the start of my day and clock out before leaving. Just make sure that the button can be operated by one end of an oar with me holding on to the other, leaning out of, but still firmly seated in, my rowboat. Dreaming of Lime Trees is the name I've just decided my rowboat will be called. I'm probably 1,000 miles from the nearest lime tree, but the sparkling water I just sipped is lime flavored, and that got me thinking. You'd never accept that sort of nonlinear thinking from an employee, but I did it on my break. Paddling out toward the open water, enjoying my muscles waking up inside my shirt, the tang of fresh air forcing its way into my nostrils. In 15 minutes, I'll be back. I know you find that hard to believe. At my desk, in my chair, at my computer, with my eyes doing what you pay me to have them do. I will. And when I wobble a little, it's because a rowboat in an office is going to wobble a little. This next poem is a sonnet. Yay. It's the type of sonnet that doesn't rhyme and isn't written in meter, but I'm calling it a sonnet. It's called Smell of Wet Earth Like the Inside of My Hands. When I step outside, I want the raindrops pressing me a little deeper with each falling. I might meet our spinning nickel center, shining a dark light, wet overcoat of itself. And I want the wild azalea above to speak one good sentence in my life worthy of carving into a pine, one of those waiting in an elementary school playground where they still want the kids to have a tree, so they paved right up to the bark on that one. I go to the drugstore sometimes just to watch us, the hesitation in the ill-lit aisle. Who buys a loaf of bread at Rite Aid? I do. You're waiting at home. You're hungry. And this next poem also has an epigraph. It's by Gerald Stern from his poem, Red Wool Bathrobe. And the epigraph reads, and that was one thing quickly becoming another. And the poem is the title poem of my book. If we had a lemon, we'd throw it and call that the sun. I'd like to invite you to the party. but I don't know your name, have your address, or know you well enough really to want you around my cat. I feel a kinship with all people, and then I share a beach with them and want to yell, use your inside voice. We're outside, but that doesn't mean we'll not dissolve if raised to the light. Some days the sea wants to chew us into shattered 2x4s. Some days she's a kitten, pasting soft hairs around our ankles. I know this for a fact. There are moist pasta salads being prepared and eaten all around me, in those bushes, for instance, and I'm not getting any. I tried to start my life out right and still lost track of where I was going. Example, I picked my college because my girlfriend went there. She slept with my best friend. I went there anyway. That determined the course of the rest of my life. I wiped the table down with bleach before sitting, and now my forearm smells. It's going to be okay, though. I'm going to need this bleach arm for some purpose. To identify some wanderers in the sky, it's helpful to determine color. At a distance, everything for me goes gray. A mountain range in a black and white film. We've been walking, my horse and I, for days. For water, we think about rivers and lick our own ideas. Pardon me, I ripped the wrong Post-it note off. All right, just 2 poems left. This is a short poem called An Emergency Every Day of the Week. It's how you know I love you. The trees along the ridgeline sway into one another, the way I lean in to you. Clouds rush from us, the way we run away from the world. An ambulance screams along the street at 3 a.m. Inside, there's you on a gurney and me on a gurney. No nurses either side, not even a driver. We split the cold air like a scalpel, a bump. I reach out my hand for yours. Yours is there in the air, and it clasps mine. The ambulance just went off a cliff. Now we're flying, and we're fine. All right, and this is my last poem. Thanks so much again for being here and for listening, everybody. This is called Our Beautiful Life When It's Filled with Shrieks. I'm doing a balancing act with a stack of fresh fruit in my basket. I love you. I want us both to eat well. We're not allowed to buy blackberries anymore because they're mean to their workers, and you read left-wing news sites. Till when? I asked, and you said nothing. So that's one healthy food off the list. I'm still buying pineapples, and you're still eating them. I guess you've never seen the websites about those. Nobody in this supermarket knows that I am a puma. This morning, our cat rolled on the floor, showing me her belly, which I leaned down and rubbed. Beneath a backyard pine tree, the neighbor's cat was eating one of our cat's moles, at least the moles we rent from the landlord for her. It's so complicated staying alive sometimes. The voices of the collection agencies on the answering machine sound menacing. They're paid to sound that way, and they're not paid much more than the people they're menacing, which can get you thinking if you're the sort who likes to think about that sort of thing. Other people subscribe to adventure cycling magazines and read about men who rode across Turkey in the late 1800s, before anything was happening in the world, before cantaloupes probably existed, when you could get an honest wage for an honest day's blackberries, when we loved like fierce mountain storms with the blood of eagles in our hearts, exchanging grocery lists that just said you, all the way down. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
All right, our third and final reader is Kaya Muvanaswar. She's a physician, writer, and Pen American Robert W. Bingham Debut Fiction Prize finalist for White Dancing Elephants Stories. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Narrative Magazine, Salon, Tin House, Electric Literature, The Millions, Joyland, Large Hearted Boy, Chattahoochee Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, and elsewhere. Her work was selected for Best Small Fictions 2019, and she has received fellowships and residencies from MacDowell, Sewanee Writers Workshop, and Community of Writers. Please welcome Kaya Muvanaswar.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you all can hear me. My first name is actually Chaya, just so that you know. And I'm going to be reading from one of the stories in the collection. I'm going to be reading from the beginning of the story to Linda. And I'll just want to say incidentally how much I enjoyed the reading by the two wonderful poets that was before me. And so this is different, except definitely these characters do read poetry. So to Linda, number one. So here I am, sitting in the doctor's waiting room, hoping no one talks to me or intuits why I'm fat, when the door that says on the outside, "Do not enter," swings open, until Linda storms out, not long for this world. The young blonde nurse stands there, bracing the open door with one hand, holding a clipboard with the other. "We should have the results back any day," she calls, though it's obvious my best friend isn't listening. "Later this week, do check," her voice wafts out, like she's a woman working in a shop, not an announcer of life versus death. Not long for this world. "Don't say things like that," I would have pleaded with to Linda if she had said the words out loud, one of her usual angry and dapper turns of phrase. "You'll fight this thing," I said when she first told me she had stomach cancer, and for once she nodded, not ridiculing the cliche. But that was a year ago, before I became this wretched person, a woman sleeping with her best friend's husband, a woman waiting to take over a life. "Aren't you full of surprises, Miss Narika Kandalwala?" Talinda would have said. "You're not as boring as I thought," if she had known. But Talinda doesn't know what her husband and I are capable of. Cancer, though, she knows. How its cells lived as shameless parasites of the body, the dark and mocking children who'd never leave home. Talinda could caution you about genes that whispered false instructions, genes speaking louder and louder over rivers of gushing new blood vessels, these rivers mindless and cruel as they crossed in confusing directions of their own, greedily serving the cells of destruction. Talinda Kim, age 37, Korean American, born to a waitress in Flushing, Queens. Board certified internist and geriatrician, married but no children. Signet cell gastric carcinoma, stage 4, prognosis 6 months. 6 months. If I weren't betraying Talinda, I'd use what I know for her benefit. My arm around her shoulder, I'd describe Audre Lorde's cancer journals, her dignity, her hope. Then Talinda would be forced, as usual, to turn on me with her mix of affection and contempt, the potent and honest combination that I've always counted on. She might say, Narika, you don't win any points for reading some Black woman's diary whose problems you aren't Black enough to understand. Amazing how you're trying to read books for a living. At some point, you have to stop going to school and get a job. At some point, you have to accept it. The real world isn't made of poetry. I'd urge her on in making fun of me. I'd do anything to distract her, talk about Dadaist art or North Korean politics or Betty Davis movies, her favorites. Now Voyager, with a childless Betty Davis trying to make do by being a cool aunt. Of human bondage, Betty as the pregnant, vulgar, coercive, determined Mildred. All about Eve, what it is like to have your life bit by bit stolen by a woman you trusted. But all I do instead is slink down in the passenger seat of Delinda's black Benz, hoping she doesn't really notice me. A real friend would take Delinda out to a movie after her day at the clinic. Some Betty Davis old romance. But who was that actress after all? Some skinny, overbearing, self-important white woman who bears more than a passing resemblance, I realized suddenly, to Delinda's husband George's own mother. The woman had never remarried after George's father left her for one of his students, a beautiful Asian woman, the two of them traveling to go teach at a university in Singapore. All Delinda has now is a mother-in-law who, like Delinda's own mother, hasn't been told anything about the cancer. A mother-in-law who's expressed the wish, loudly at times, that George had never married Delinda, who wished Delinda had never existed. If I loved Delinda, really loved her, I'd tell her that her husband seduced me and vice versa, that the three of us should get far away from each other, that she deserves a better life, friend, and lover. If I were good, I'd exit pursued by a bear. For once I'd be the one with adult knowledge Delinda didn't have, and I could tell her what was what. My affair with her husband began 6 months ago, well after she'd been diagnosed, after she'd tried to keep working as if nothing were happening, but was fatigued and couldn't stop losing weight. I gave in after George called me in the middle of the night, crying for me to come help cook something Delinda could eat. After George and I started meeting up in grocery stores, hospital cafeterias, places where we could help Delinda together while she was going through surgery and modified chemo. Tired by marriage, or maybe by his marriage to Delinda specifically, with its burdens, the heaviest of which was extreme privacy, George pulled me in. The lingering touch on my arm, my back, my hand, the grateful smiles that just never felt straightforward. Then his expression when I told him how I'd tried and failed a few times to have a child with donor sperm. I know what it's like to hope and be disappointed, he'd said, to wait and want and not have children, to be the only people waiting in the world. Believe me, I know what it's like. George and Delinda tried a lot too. It wasn't clear now if her in vitro might have even speeded up the cancer. She would have kept trying, but George was the one who made her stop, unable to bear how relentless she was. They'd just gotten to the point of discussing adoption when her new symptoms started, and then she had to tell George she'd never make him a father. Had she reached for him the way I reached for Delinda herself when I found out? When she got sick, Delinda forbade her husband from getting his family involved. No mother, no sisters, and George's father was long gone anyway. So George kept making more and more frequent calls to me in the middle of the night while locked in the bathroom or sitting in his car. Many calls, talking alone, and then finally George and I were alone. He lavished long, splendid kisses on me after he'd undressed me at my place, more recently kissing my round belly. Talinda isn't one for gaining weight, not even back in her college pre-med classes when she didn't leave her room for days. Even after hormone treatments, trying to get pregnant, she stayed all angles and petite, high-fashion sinews. George is tall, over 6'3", blue-eyed, ever so gentle with his slightly stooped posture. Talinda was the one who'd poked fun at his rumpled professor demeanor, complained behind his back about how low his salary stayed even when he made full professor. She didn't see him for how brilliant he was. She'd never really made him feel special, I told myself, even though I'd never touched the truth of them, and I knew that. Years ago, the only time that George ever came close to leaving Talinda, early on when they were living together but not yet engaged, during the harshest days of Talinda's medical residency, when she would stay at the hospital for up to 4 days at a time without calling once. She'd finally buck the routine and come home before the end of her shift, trading with someone, running home all the way. It was unthinkable to her not to work the hardest, not to dominate, not to try and be the best. Unthinkable to just take the time to answer George's calls, even though George had told her that if she didn't cut down her hours, they'd break up. That night, when she got home, she cried when she didn't find George, calling me to come over so she wouldn't act like a dimwit when he did show up. Disheveled then, she sat at my feet waiting for him, saying that if I breathed a word about how desperate she'd become, she'd murder me. When George let himself in later that night, I saw how Talinda pretended not to care, but how she then came up behind him as he sat eating alone. How she touched him so gently without asking anything. Earlier today, waiting for Talinda to be done at the clinic, by avoiding certain patterns of thought, by walking fast whenever I passed by mirrors, by keeping in my mind an image of Talinda, not loving George, never really loving him, I made it all right that I would be the one having George's baby. Just for a few seconds, I told myself that once I started really showing, I would tell her that this was a baby conceived from donor sperm. I'd accept it when she teased me about using the sperm of a white man. But it's possible Talinda will be gone before the birth and never even know my baby is half white. We'd have our joy once Talinda was gone, once our goddess Talinda had risen fully out of reach. High in a white palace, the king's daughter, the golden girl. That image from a novel the two of us read in high school, from an old story of infidelity and careless, childless adults. By thinking of Talinda as always being high above me, I could sometimes think of her as being untouched by what I had been doing with George. Like she had too much pride to be hurt by it. Like she had better things to do. But here I was, a little more than 4 months pregnant with a boy, with George's son. Thank you.
Thank you, Chaya. I want to know what happens now. All right, we have just a few minutes left. If we have any questions, I can't see the chat because I'm on my phone. So I'm sorry, I can't moderate that. But if Tori's still on or if anybody can moderate any questions, otherwise I'll just go ahead and tell you about our upcoming events. And I just want to say thank you all for being here. Oh, we have a question about the Frost Poet Program. and Christopher's previous day job.
Should I go first, or would you like to go first, Daisy?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
My previous day job, it was writing copy for internet sites that sell things like Best Buy and stuff like that. So I got product information from the people that made the stuff, and I had to put it in certain word counts and do all that. And I thought it would be interesting to be a copywriter, and it melted my brain after a while, particularly when a new guy took over and literally doubled all the product, the amount that everybody was supposed to do, but without changing anything else. So we just had to get twice as much out. And basically everybody ended up quitting within the space of like 2 months. So, and I always felt a little happy that I got a poem out of it. So yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually not completely sure about which one you're talking about. Is it so after Connotary was published, I did get to go to a poetry seminar online. Yeah, and it was online because of the pandemic, of course. And it was wonderful. I got to workshop with Patrick Donnelly and hear some lectures from Alison Joseph and Martha Rhodes. It was wonderful to like get some new poems workshop there. And even though I didn't get to go to the Frost Place because of like schedule, it was very sad. But it was just wonderful to see the book come out, and everyone has been so kind in the Frost Place, and also Bull City Press, which is a wonderful press. So I'm just very happy to get some poems out in the world with them.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again. I'd like to remind everybody to please donate to our December community partner, The Bottom, and you can access their website through the link in the chat and learn more about them and donate. And let me tell you about some upcoming events. We'd like you to join us on January 12th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for Reimagining the Poetic Form, a writer's workshop led by Ernesto L. Abatia. In this online workshop, students will be introduced to various poetic forms such as sestina, sonnet, villanelle, pantome, haiku, ringa, abecedarian, gazelle, and golden shovel. I've never even heard of some of these, so this sounds really interesting. Learn about the history of these forms and their cultural significance, how they've been used in the past, and how they're being used now. You can learn more and RSVP by visiting our Facebook page. There's a link in the chat. And we would also like to see you for next month's reading series. That'll be January 29th from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That event will feature Rasha Abdulati, Agochu Quo, Damien Okpara, and Michelle Ross. You can access that event on Zoom at the same address that we used tonight, tiny.utk.edu/sundress, password SAFTA. That info was in the chat as well. And as I said, this is my last night as reading series coordinator. So I would like to thank Erin and everybody at Sundress for making this a great experience. I will still be around. I just won't be in this role, but I'd like to thank everybody who has participated in the reading series. It's been great, a great way to stay connected during these strange times through the written word, and I'll miss it, but it's time to move on. So thank you all again. Have a great rest of the year. Happy New Year, and we'll see you soon.